Welcome back to my 12 Days of Christmas. Today I have a Pinterest recipe. I love Pinterest recipes because they're tried and true, most generally. I've never had one fail yet. So this one is interesting because it's a cross between a rum cake and a fruit cake. I thought it would be really fun to try. I've never made it before. This is my first attempt, but I know it's going to be good. So let's get started. I have all of my ingredients here that we are going to need. And I did keep my recipe pulled up on my phone, so you're going to see me look at that because this is something that I've never made before, like I said, so I'm going to be following this really well. And I will put that recipe, I'll link it in my box below. Okay, so you want your oven preheated to 350, which I did. You also want a 7-inch round cake pan, which I did not have 7-inch round, so I'm using a bun pan. I think that'll work just fine. You want to grease it with butter or oil, whatever you have, grease it with. Okay, so one thing that this recipe requires is to soak your fruit in rum well before you start to make your recipe. The longer you soak it, the better it's going to be. We soaked ours overnight, so you can soak it up to 2 weeks, but I think overnight is fine. I just took a little bowl. You need 1 cup of fruit. You can pick the fruit that you like. We just used dried cranberries. Joe is on that end of the island. We used dried cranberries, raisins, golden raisins. What else did we have? Pineapple.
And mango.
An apricot.
Was it apricot?
Yeah,
Okay.
pretty sure it was apricot. So we chopped those up really fine and have had these soaking for overnight, a little bit longer. And so we're gonna strain these first thing and reserve the liquid. Let's get that started. I just got a really big whiff of rum. All right, I'm just gonna use my little strainer here and pour that over. Oh my gosh, this fruit's all plumped up really well. And like I said, you only need 1 cup of fruit. And just pick the fruit you want, and I just chopped up a bunch. I'm sure I have more than a cup of fruit. I have never actually had a fruit cake before. I'm not, I've heard so many things about how terrible they are, so it's kind of turned me off from eating them, I guess, which I shouldn't be that way. I'm gonna sift my dry ingredients, except for my sugar. I'm not going to sift the sugar in with that. That's gonna be mixed in with my butter. So I have my little tiny sifter. Wish I had a bigger one. And I'm going to sift 1.5 cups of flour. Sifting your flour and dry ingredients kind of gives it a little bit of air and fluffs it up a little bit. So we're gonna have a nice fluffy cake. So before I finish sifting all of my flour in here, I'm gonna add my spices. You want 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder. You ever had a fruit cake or a rum cake? I don't think that I've had a rum cake. I don't know. I may have tried one at some point. I'm not sure. But I know I haven't had a fruit cake. All right, 1/2 cup of baking powder, and we want 1/8 cup, or 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder, and 1/8 teaspoon of baking soda. So I'm gonna use about half of my 1/4 teaspoon. And I'm gonna separate these. I don't repeat. 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Thank you. 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Teaspoon of ginger. It's just some ground ginger. I want to mention these are just tops to Parmesan cheese containers. Once we finish with the Parmesan cheese, I use those on my little mason jars because they're perfect for spices. Okay, so we have the ginger, a 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon. I have my husband behind the scenes keeping me organized again. He's good at that. And mace. We're going to use a 1/4 teaspoon of mace. Now, if you don't have mace, I know that we had a hard time finding mace because we live in a pretty destitute area. They don't always have a lot, but you can use nutmeg in place of mace if you do not have it. Ground clove. We are going to use a 1/4 teaspoon of ground clove. It's already smelling like a really good cake. All right, we're gonna just sift all of those in together. All right, so we have all of this sifted in here. So I'm gonna set this aside. Okay, you want 2 eggs at room temperature. So I'm gonna crack one and just keep the white of it. Get me just a little tiny thing to put the yolk in. Okay, because we're gonna whip this white into soft peaks. We're gonna use the egg yolk in the cake, but for right now I want to keep it separate. And just whip the whites. Let's whip up the whites. Soft peaks, you can see they kind of flop over a little bit. Okay, we're gonna put those aside. And right now I'm going to add butter, a 1/2 cup of room temperature butter, and a 1/2 cup of brown sugar. I'm gonna mix those together. 1/2 cup of butter, room temperature, and a 1/2 cup of brown sugar. You can use light or dark brown, either one. Okay, we want to mix this until it's nice and creamy. Okay, I'm going to add my eggs. Now this is the yolk from the egg white and another egg. And I know you're probably cringing that I'm cracking this egg directly into the bowl for fear of shells, but that's how I do it. All right, now we want to add our molasses. Again, I'm using my push measure cup. I told you in yesterday's video, I love this thing. It just makes life so much easier. Just take my spatula and scrape that off. Love this thing. All right, let's mix this in. All right, now we're gonna add our vanilla, 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla. Just use a 1/2 teaspoon in my cap. And 1/2 cup of milk. And this is gonna curdle a bit, and that's okay. It is okay. So we wanna use 4 teaspoons of the rum. This is a 1/2 teaspoon measure, so I'm going to do 8. 3, 6, 7, and 8. That is the rum mixture that we reserved from the fruit, what the fruit was sitting on. You see how curdled it is? That is normal. That's what the recipe's telling me. It's totally normal. Okay, so I'm going to move this aside, and we're going to take our fruit, or one, oh no, let me see. Here it is. We're gonna take our fruit and put it in the flour mixture. This is just so that it doesn't sink to the bottom of the cake. We wanna dredge it in the flour and the spices. Now we're gonna add this to our wet mixture, along with our egg whites. You just want to gently fold everything together. Until it's mixed. All right, now we're going to get this put into the pan. Just gonna slowly pour it in here. And like I said, I am not using a round cake pan. I'm just gonna use a bundt pan. I think it'll work fine. Kind of go through this, make sure it's evenly put in the pan. Now if you put this in a round baking pan, you can sprinkle the top with raisins if you like. But where this is in a bundt pan, this is actually the bottom of the cake, so obviously I'm not going to sprinkle it with raisins. I think the fruit inside is going to be enough. All right, we're going to put this in 350-degree oven, which is preheated, for 45 to 50 minutes, or until a toothpick comes out clean. It's out of the oven. It looks good. It's still a little bit warm, but it's been cooling about half an hour, 45 minutes. Okay, so this is not part of the recipe, but it's something that I'm going to do. I still have some fruit soaked in the rum left, so I poked some holes in the cake, and I'm going to take some of that rum and I'm going to pour it over the cake. I think that this will be good. Just a little something extra, because I like to make all these recipes my own. Let's do that. And then what I'm going to do, I have some chopped pecans. I'm going to sprinkle those on the top. It looks a little boring without these, and I think that this would be good. And I like nuts, especially pecans. Oh my gosh, it really smells good. Maybe that's just the rum that I'm smelling, I don't know. Doesn't that look amazing? Okay, so let's taste it and see if it tastes just as amazing as it looks. Let's see the fruit. Moment of truth. He's behind the camera. He's gonna taste this too. Okay.
Like a spice cake almost.
Well, I can definitely taste the fruit. I can definitely taste the molasses. I think that's what comes out more than anything. I think the rum would have come out more had we soaked the fruit longer. But it's good. I think it's definitely worth making. So if you want to try this recipe, I'll leave it in my description box below.